January 1942. The freezing waters of the Norwegian fjords. A Royal Navy submarine had just fired 4 torpedoes at the German troop transport Bahia Laura. 3 missed cleanly. The 4th ran erratic, veered off course, and struck anyway. The after-action report logged the hit as a probable gyroscope navigation error. The torpedo that made that hit had been condemned by the Navy's own ordnance inspectors 18 months earlier. Test firing had revealed a fault in the depth-keeping mechanism. Under certain sea temperatures, the weapon ran up to 6 feet shallower than set. It could be deflected by strong propeller wash. Its magnetic pistol, the detonating trigger designed to fire beneath a ship's keel and break her back, activated inconsistently on degaussed hulls. The fault was documented. The fix was delayed. Manufacture continued because Britain had no other torpedo available in sufficient numbers. By 1944, German naval intelligence had recovered enough failed specimens from shallow water to reverse-engineer the depth-keeping flaw. Their analysis confirmed what British ordnance officers already knew. The weapon was not performing to specification. Their conclusion was that it represented an acceptable wartime compromise. That conclusion was wrong in one critical respect. The torpedo was not performing to specification. It was performing beyond it. This is the story of how a documented engineering failure became one of the most effective submarine weapons of the war, why the flaw that made it unreliable also made it lethal in ways the designers never intended, and why the German engineers who copied it never understood what they were actually duplicating. To understand why the fault mattered, you need to understand the target problem British submariners faced in 1939. A torpedo set to run at 30 feet and strike a ship's side delivers its explosive energy to armored belt plating. The blast travels outward. Much of it dissipates into seawater. A ship hit in the side can flood a compartment and continue. A torpedo set to run at 24 feet and pass beneath the keel delivers its energy to the ship's bottom plating. The explosion creates a gas bubble that expands, lifts the hull, then collapses. The hull bends. Then it bends back. The keel, designed to resist longitudinal compression, not lateral flexion, often breaks. A ship broken amidships does not flood. She folds. The shallow running fault in the British Mark 8 torpedo meant that weapons aimed at the side of a target routinely passed beneath her keel instead. The gyroscope error that caused erratic tracks occasionally brought the weapon under a target that would otherwise have been missed entirely. The magnetic pistol failures reduced reliability against degaussed warships, but most merchant vessels were not degaussed. Against the primary target of the Atlantic campaign, the shallow-running fault was not a flaw. It was a capability. The Mark 8 had been designed in 1927. Its core specifications were conventional for the period: 21 inches in diameter, 21 feet in length, a 750-pound Torpex warhead, a maximum range of 5,000 yards at 45 knots or 7,000 yards at 41 knots, driven by a Brotherhood engine running on compressed air and kerosene. The depth-keeping mechanism used a hydrostatic valve that sensed water pressure and adjusted a set of horizontal rudders. Under ideal conditions, it held depth to within 2 feet of the set point. Under cold water conditions below 8 degrees Celsius, the hydrostatic valve responded sluggishly. Under thermoclines, it could lag by as much as 6 feet before correcting. The North Atlantic and the Norwegian fjords presented these conditions routinely from October through April, the period when German convoy traffic to Norway and the Atlantic was heaviest. The British submarine service operated in exactly the waters where the fault would manifest most consistently, against exactly the target set where shallower running would do the most damage. The magnetic pistol problem was more complex. The Mark 8 could be fitted with either a contact pistol or a duplex pistol, combining contact and magnetic triggers. The magnetic element was designed to detect the distortion a steel hull created in the Earth's magnetic field and fire when the torpedo passed beneath. In theory, this allowed detonation under a target without a direct hit on the hull. In practice, the magnetic field of the Earth varied with latitude. The sensitivity calibrated at Greenock for the relatively gentle magnetic gradient of the English Channel was too sensitive for the steeper gradients found at high northern latitudes. Torpedoes fired at Norwegian targets in 1940 and 1941 detonated prematurely, sometimes at 100 yards, sometimes at 500, before reaching the target. The submarine HMS Trident fired a full salvo at the German cruiser Prinz Eugen in Norwegian waters in February 1942. Every torpedo with a duplex pistol detonated early. The boat survived only because Commander Geoffrey Sladen held his depth and escaped into deeper water before the German escorts could localize him. The magnetic pistol was withdrawn from general issue for high-latitude operations by mid-1942. Submariners reverted to the contact pistol alone. That pistol was reliable. With the contact pistol standard, the shallow running fault became the weapon's dominant characteristic in northern waters. Between September 1939 and May 1945, British submarines fired 5,753 Mark VIII torpedoes and achieved 2,431 hits, a success rate of 42.2%. Against the German operational average for the same period, with the G7A torpedo of 31 to 34%, the Mark VIII outperformed by a significant margin. Post-war analysis by the Naval Staff History Branch identified the depth-keeping deviation as a contributing factor in approximately 14% of hits recorded against major merchant tonnage, specifically vessels where the contact report noted strikes forward of the engine room or near the keel line. The comparison against the German G7A reveals the deeper irony. The G7A was technically superior in almost every specification. Its depth-keeping mechanism used a more sophisticated pendulum and hydrostat combination that held depth to within 1 foot under standard conditions. Its magnetic pistol, the Pi-2, had been redesigned after the 1940 Norwegian campaign, exposed identical premature detonation problems. Its 617-pound warhead was lighter than the Mark VIII's 750-pound Torpex charge, but its range at 44 knots was 6,560 yards against the Mark VIII's 5,000. On paper, the G7A solved every problem the Mark VIII left unresolved. In practice, German submariners in the Atlantic reported consistent underrunning against British merchant targets. The precise depth-keeping worked as designed. The torpedoes ran where they were set. Against fully loaded merchantmen with deep drafts, running at 20 feet struck the hull side. Against lightly loaded vessels riding higher, running at 20 feet sometimes passed beneath the keel entirely, but without the thermocline-induced shallowing that gave the Mark VIII its accidental effectiveness. German naval intelligence recovered depth-keeping records from 3 captured or beached British submarines between 1942 and 1944. The hydrostatic valve design was photographed and analyzed at the Torpedo Inspectorate in Kiel. The conclusion was that British industry had produced a second-rate depth-keeping solution, an acceptable compromise given wartime production pressures. The engineers who wrote that were correct about the mechanism. They were wrong about the consequence. They were looking at a faulty part. They were not asking what the faulty part did to targeting outcomes at the latitudes and temperatures where it was actually being fired. Post-war analysis at the Admiralty Research Laboratory at Teddington, conducted between 1947 and 1949, reviewed 1,200 attack records and found that 19% of hits classified as probable keel strikes had occurred on firings where set depth and actual running depth differed by 3 feet or more due to thermal variance. The analysis was filed and not widely circulated. The conclusion was professionally awkward. A defect that remained unfixed for production reasons had generated a category of lethality that deliberate design might not have produced. The Mark VIII stayed in Royal Navy service until 1987. Its last firings in anger came during the Falklands conflict of 1982, when HMS Conqueror used Mark VIII contact pistol torpedoes to sink the Argentine cruiser General Belgrano. The weapon that had run shallow in Norwegian fjords in 1942 was still sinking ships 40 years later. The German engineers who copied its depth-keeping mechanism understood the mechanism perfectly. They did not understand that the mechanism's failure was the point. You can reverse engineer a part. You cannot reverse engineer what happens when that part misbehaves in cold water at 60 degrees north. The Royal Navy spent the war firing a torpedo that did not work as designed. It also posted the highest torpedo hit rate of any submarine force in the conflict. Anyone who finds that surprising has not been paying attention to how Britain's weapons actually win its wars. Not through perfection, through the willingness to keep firing an imperfect weapon until the imperfection becomes doctrine.